Hello and welcome to another episode of Twice as Lively with me, Ken Heckenlively. The title of today's episode, Trump will win the midterms bigly. That's right. I'm stealing a little bit from Scott Adams today. And so we're going to talk about how Trump, not the Republicans, are going to win the midterms. I think that's an important distinction that you will find very interesting. But before we get there, as always, we begin with our simultaneous sip. What am I drinking today? Well, it is Friday, 2 o'clock, which means if you're on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast, that means you can have an alcoholic beverage, and it would not be a social faux pas. Because if you are listening to this on the East Coast, the work week is over. And if you would like to relax with an alcoholic beverage, that is your right as a free citizen. But for me, I'm just having some wonderful coffee. My regular drink, cafe Americano with a little bit of room for cream and some honey, because I always like a little bit of sugar with my caffeine. So let's begin with our simultaneous sip. Get your beverage, lift it to your luscious lips, and take a drink. Ah, so refreshing, so refreshing. I'm probably going to need to be taking a couple drinks from my coffee because I worry that I'm going to yell a lot today. I worry that this is going to be a very long broadcast because I'm confronting a very serious question. And that very serious question is, have I gone nuts? I genuinely wonder if I've gone nuts because none of the news makes any sense to me, right or left. It seems to me that everybody in the media has gone nuts, and I can't find a single person who accurately represents my view of what's going on in the world. And so I'm going to struggle a bit today because I don't quite know what I think. And hopefully it's in my talking, in my rant, if you will, that I will figure out what in the Heckenlively is going on, because none of it makes any sense to me. As I look at the news, I would imagine that there would be some people in the news who would be saying Trump is doing a fantastic job and he should be cruising to an easy win in the midterms, and something truly unexpected happening in the last 2 years of his presidency, which is he is well positioned to get a lot of things done. Now, remember, that's unusual. The final 2 years of a presidency are often referred to as being lame duck. But as I look at all of the indicators, I say to myself, Trump is really positioned well to perhaps have the most successful lame duck era of any president in history. Now, I've mentioned Scott Adams, and so I'm going to use a Scott Adams trick here, which is Scott would always say, if you believe you understand what's going on, you should be able to predict what comes next. So, with Scott's approach to this, I'm going to make a prediction. My prediction is that come November, the Republicans are going to increase their numbers in the House and the Senate. So, see, I'm putting myself to the test. So, mark it. August 7th, 2026. Ken Heckenlively is saying that the Republicans are going to add seats in the House, they're going to add seats in the Senate, and Trump is going to be able to have a very productive lame duck period of his presidency, which will make it very easy for Vice President Vance to run and win in the 2028 election. So mark it. If I am correct, we should be able to come back in a couple months and say, all right, Kent called it when nobody else did. And if I'm wrong, well, that's great. And I'll change my opinions. And the reasons why I was wrong and other people were correct will come clear. So, what is it that makes me say that Trump, not the Republicans, are set for victory in the 2026 midterms? Well, let's go back to those issues that Trump ran on in 2024. Securing the border. Is the border secure? Yes, it's very secure. It's never been more secure. What about the deportations? Yes, they're happening. Are terrible things happening in the country? No. What about the crime rates? They're dropping like crazy. Do you remember in 2024, we were concerned about rising crime? There's also a number of other things that Trump has done which don't necessarily get the headlines, but they're very important. So Trump and my family come from a real estate background. And sometimes when you own real estate, you realize that it's not the flashy things that you do, it's the problems that you avoid that mark you as a success. Now, Trump is a very wealthy man, which means he's got a good instinct for heading off potential trouble. So a lot of people had talked about how the left wing always seemed to have the money to raise a fuss against Republicans and fight them, like they had unlimited money to go after my co-author, Alex Jones. How did those forces have millions and millions of dollars to mount a lawsuit and a very sophisticated PR campaign against Alex Jones? Well, they did it because they were getting dark money, probably through the United States Agency for International Development. Do you remember early in Trump's second term, that was such a big thing that Trump was going to be going after the USAID money. And I think it was something like 87% of the money was going to shady organizations. Basically, what was happening is that this money, which was going supposedly to nations which were struggling, was actually going to non-governmental organizations of a leftist bent. So he killed that money. This is important to understand because when you have an understanding that these political attacks against conservatives and against Republicans, as well as genuine progressive causes, are basically funded by corporate interests. It becomes clear what is going on and why it was so important that Trump shut off that dark river of money. So recently this week, I was talking with two Hollywood producers who were very interested in having further discussions with me and possibly optioning some of my books for documentaries or to develop into some sort of entertainment project. But what they wanted to understand is they wanted to understand my political perspective. And so they, I think, would consider themselves left of center, and I consider myself right of center. And so I was explaining to them why I felt that we could work together. And I explained it something like this. And I said, you consider yourself left of center. I consider myself a little bit right of center. And if we maintain that frame, it doesn't seem like we can be friends. But I encourage them to think about like a football field and two teams which are playing against each other. And so, what if each team had some freedom of movement on the field, but as each team approached the 20-yard line, in other words, in a position to score, the refs started making calls so that neither side could win a touchdown. So the players on the field would feel like they were in an athletic competition, but when it came close to scoring, no team could score. So I encourage them to basically go back a little bit, go to a higher perspective. Don't see the fight between right and left, because the issue that they're arguing about is probably something they both agree on. They may have different approaches, but they see the same problem. But I encourage them to look a little bit differently, to take maybe a higher perspective, which is the good ideas of the left and the good ideas of the right will never be allowed to be executed, because that might genuinely imperil these special interests. It might cut down on the amount of money that they make. So you would have the situation like you did in the second Bush administration, where we were at war in so many foreign countries, and our CIA was kidnapping people from even friendly countries and having them tortured, either doing it themselves or having other countries do it where torture is allowed. And then Obama was supposed to be such a breath of fresh air that he was going to stop the wars. And then it turns out that during Obama's 8 years, he dropped more bombs on more countries than Bush ever did. Trump is different than either of those two. So don't look at it as a fight between right and left. You have to look at it as what forces are preventing genuine experimentation by both the right and the left. And so Trump is turning the game back into a fair one. How is he doing it? By getting rid of at least one of these massive rivers of dark money. Okay, let's look at some other things. Today was the fifth release of previously withheld UFO documents. Now, I haven't had the chance to really dig into it, but it seems like more of the same. And I say more of the same in something of a positive manner, which is the previous 4 releases have shown very clearly that since at least 1947, our government has been very interested in UFOs and hasn't known what to make of the phenomena. Yes, I suspect that there are even more things that have been hidden, but at least for the general public, it is now established beyond a reasonable doubt that at the very least, our government has been as puzzled by these UFOs as the general public. That is a point in Trump's favor. That happened because of Donald Trump. Okay, another release of previously hidden information, and that is about the Jeffrey Epstein files. Nothing happened during the Biden administration. There was zero effort to release any information about Jeffrey Epstein. In the first Trump administration, Epstein got arrested. Do you remember that? And then they were leading up to prosecuting him, and he mysteriously died in his prison cell. Well, this gets back again to the game. I think that more than anything else, Trump has exposed the public to this game which is being played behind the scenes. The game is that we have these people called politicians who think that they're in charge, but the deep state is really in charge. So it doesn't matter if you're right or left. If you are moving in a direction of transparency, they will try to stop you. So I'm very confused when I see the people whom I considered to be genuine conservatives not realizing these things. The whole idea of Trump running was that the system itself was rotten to the core. It was like a building which had termites and needed its foundations redone. I think that that's how Trump looks at the government. Now, do I think that even when you are the president, you are scared of these forces? Yes, I do. Now, why do I think that? Well, as you can see over one shoulder, that one, I've got that book, Presidential Takedown. That was about the COVID-19 task force. I wrote that book with Dr. Paul Alexander, who was the senior pandemic advisor. So arguably, he was one of the most important people on the task force. I asked him the question of why Trump was not taking the advice of several people on the task force, specifically on the question of whether school children should have gone back to school in the fall of 2020. Paul Alexander told me that the concern was that Trump was being threatened, either himself personally or members of his family. I thought to myself, this guy, Dr. Alexander, is the senior pandemic advisor, and so he should know whether those threats were legitimate or not. And I asked him that very question, and he said, I don't know. But behind the scenes of the COVID-19 task force, that speculation ran rampant. And so it's one of those situations where here I am, an independent writer, branded a conspiracy theorist. I believe I'm just trying to get to the truth. And I get an answer like that from somebody who is in the inner sanctum of government. And that changes my perspective a little bit. So when I hear people like Candace Owens and people like Lionel Nation, Ian Carroll, others talk about Trump turning his back on Charlie Kirk and not looking very deeply into it, I say to myself that there's likely being a more sophisticated game being played. So just because Trump is the president doesn't mean he's safe. In fact, if anything, he knows he has to be very careful. I think Trump knows that the Charlie Kirk assassination is suspicious. What I would believe is happening behind the scenes is that I think Trump is figuring out who he trusts to figure out what happened to Charlie Kirk. It's very disheartening to me to see people whom I respect, some of whom I've worked with, very publicly break with President Trump, because the opinions and conclusions I'm coming to seem like I'm making them from an even more distant perspective than these individuals have. In other words, when I write these books and I talk to these people and these books get published and reviewed, it's all out there in the open. And I don't understand why the perspective that I have, which is that Trump knows that there are people who do not wish him well, people who will do terrible things to him, that he has to move very cautiously. But Trump continues to move. So I'm a little bit disappointed that I don't hear somebody in the public space saying that Trump needs to be given the benefit of the doubt on a couple of these things. Now, they may not work out, but don't say things which are so patently stupid that the majority of the public will not believe you. What do I talk about? What do I mean when I say there are things that members of the media are saying which strike me as patently stupid? Here's one of them. The United States has fired so many missiles and dropped so many bombs on Iran that our stockpiles are low. Okay, I can believe that. So I believe. Point number one. Then they follow that up with, this has done absolutely nothing to hurt Iran or change the government's mind about things. And I say to myself, they blew a lot of shit up. I'm sorry, if you blew a lot of shit up and that shit was expensive, that's going to cause you to change your mind on things, okay? The situation is not exactly the same as it was at the beginning of the war, because since you shot off all those missiles and dropped off all those bombs, you blew up a lot of expensive shit. That expensive shit probably needs to be replaced. That's going to cost money. Is Iran making a lot of money during this war? No, they're not. So, at the very least, it would seem that it would be responsible for these people to say, well, the attitude of the Iranian government may not have changed, but their capacity to engage in mischief has been severely downgraded. That, to me, would seem to be intellectually defensible. But you can't tell me that we have shot off so many missiles and dropped so many bombs that our stockpiles are low and it's had zero effect. Don't do that and expect me to believe it because I'm not a fucking idiot. Okay? So, I don't understand how during the election, so many people seem to have a sophisticated understanding of all of the treachery of the deep state. And now you think that just because Trump is president, he's in charge of all of it. That just doesn't track. If you don't at least acknowledge that argument, you lose me as somebody who would respect your opinion. So I ask you, conservative and liberal commentators, don't say things which are patently stupid and then act angry when we don't buy your bullshit. You have to at least make some rational sense. Give me an argument that I don't feel like an idiot agreeing with. I may not agree with you, but I can say you've got a consistent, logical point of view, and it's not embarrassing to hold that opinion. But if you hold the opinion that the Iran war has depleted our stockpiles and had zero effect on Iran's ability to do harm in the region, you're an idiot. I'm sorry, that just doesn't track. So, give me an argument which makes sense, and I'm likely to support you. Don't give me this bullshit. Okay, moving on to other stories. These are the kind of stories I like. So, you may know this basketball player, Enes Kanter, and now Freedom. So, I'm not much of a sports guy, but I did get the chance to hear him talk at a Freedom Fest, and he just seemed like a great guy. I actually got my picture taken with him. It's on this video. But I got up today and I saw this article on Fox News, and it just made me laugh. Former NBA first-round draft pick Enes Kanter Freedom declares for 2027 WNBA draft. Oh my God, this is hilarious. This guy is so tall, okay? So what he's done is he looked at the requirements for the WNBA and their transgender craziness, and he said, wow, so all I have to do is say I'm a woman and I'm eligible for the WNBA. And so what does he do? He signs up for the NBA, WNBA. So this guy who's like 7 feet tall is going to submit himself to the WNBA draft just to show you how nuts it is. Going back to Scott Adams, this was one of Scott Adams' principles, which is when the liberals do something crazy, embrace and amplify the issue. So, Enes Kanter, Freedom, kudos to you. I deeply respect you. Good job, Enes, saying you're a woman and you want to play in the WNBA. That just amuses me to no end. So keep doing that. I friggin' love it. Okay, moving on to other people who are doing things I don't understand. And it hurts me. It hurts me deeply because I love these people. Tucker Carlson. I'm not quite sure what's going on with him. I watch him constantly. I love him. I'd love to be on his show. And he's always seemed to strike me as somebody who has a sophisticated understanding of the world. And then he just starts doing some stupid shit that I don't understand. Like this idea of starting a third party. And it ain't gonna work. There's some part that I understand it. So let me make the argument that Tucker Carlson is really doing something great. So I think the rational argument for what Tucker Carlson is doing is that he sees that Trump is being pulled to the left and he wants to pull him back to the right. And so, in some sense, I can understand it. But the way he's doing it, I just think is a disaster. I think it's going to end badly because I think that Trump himself, not the Republicans, are going to drag this party and this country to a better place. As I've said, so many ways that Trump has done that and shown himself not to be a typical politician, not to be beholden to the left or the right. So let me go through these things, which are the 10 points of Tucker Carlson's new party. Maybe I'll convince myself. Okay. Number one, fair. The same rules should apply to presidents, federal agents, and elites such as Jeffrey Epstein, whose impunity Carlson cast as emblematic of an Epstein class, enriching itself through a corrupt system. Epstein's dead, Carlson. Don't you know that? Yes. And it takes a while to go after these people. Do you see how they're going after Fauci now? Okay. This has never happened in my lifetime. Okay. So I've been in this fight against the deep state since about 2002. Okay. Specifically on the vaccine and autism issue. So finally, we're going after one of the members of this deeply corrupt big pharma state, and it's not enough for you. You're saying, hey, all these people are being protected. Sorry. It was Trump who got the Epstein files out. Sorry, Tucker. It was Trump who was among the first to report Epstein to law enforcement in 2007. Okay. So please have a little bit of understanding that just because you're the fucking president of the United States does not mean you have control over the deep state. 2, sovereign. Carlson claimed Israel pushed the United States into the Iran war through bribery or threat or both, while describing foreign lobbying, corporate control of government, and high interest debt as forms of slavery. Tucker, have you seen the videos of Trump in the 1980s saying that Iran needs to be dealt with? Okay, so Trump does what he thinks is right. Now, I'm not saying it's going to end perfectly. It may end very badly, but it's not because Trump was pushed into it. It was because Trump thought it was a good idea. 3, productive. America should rebuild farming, manufacturing, and craftsmanship while rejecting an economy dominated by finance, real estate, speculation, surveillance systems, and weapons. Tucker, are you unaware of what Trump and Vance have done to bring American manufacturing home? You should be celebrating what they are doing, not acting like he's Joe Biden or these Democrats or Republicans who are very interested in offshoring American jobs. Trump, more than any president, is interested in onshoring our manufacturing. 4, beautiful. Carlson alleged that urban planners deliberately uglified American cities and portrayed brutalist architecture, graffiti, public drug use, and violent crime as deliberate attacks on the public. Yeah. Have you noticed that Trump likes to build beautiful things like the big, beautiful ballroom or the 250th triumphal arch that they're doing in Washington, D.C.? Yeah. Trump is a beauty guy. Have you seen his wife? She's a supermodel. I think Trump is a beauty guy. So why aren't you getting on the Trump train, Tucker? 5, healthy. Carlson embraced RFK Jr.'s food agenda, called for universal sobriety, and said widespread use of drugs such as Xanax, Adderall, and SSRIs had left America, blah, blah, blah. I'll just cut off. Tucker, do you realize that RFK Jr. is the Secretary of Health and Human Services? Tucker, do you also not realize that Trump, unlike you, has always avoided alcohol, drugs, and cigarettes? So I'm not quite sure what you want him to do. He's doing it. 6 is honesty, but I can't read it because it's cut off. So, are you unaware that Trump is one of the most honest people who has ever been in the presidency? For all the crazy shit that comes out of his mouth, do you think he says it because he doesn't believe it? No, because unlike the typical politician, Trump is unfiltered. I have never heard anybody say that they don't think Trump says what he thinks is true. Now, to the complaints of many that he is like a used car salesman and saying everything is going to be great. Well, that's because he grew up in the church of Norman Vincent Peale, and he believes in the power of positive thinking, which is that you can basically think things into existence. You can push people to make decisions which are in their interest. And it's much more likely to happen rather than if you just sit back and say everything sucks. So you have a choice. Can you be a realist and say everything sucks, which it does? Or can you be an optimist and try to get people to make better choices? That seems to be the way Trump operates. 7, optimistic. Carlson argued that having children is a biological imperative and the foundation of long-term thinking, while blaming aging and childless elites for policies that disregard future generations. Tucker, are you aware that he has that Trump has 5 children? His vice president and his wife Usha just had their 4th child. It doesn't seem like childlessness is a problem in the Trump administration. 8, wise. Schools should teach how the physical world actually works and what he called unchanging facts about human nature, including innate differences between men and women, rather than credentials, screens, and technological facts. Tucker, are you unaware that there has been no more vociferous critic of the transgender movement, especially in the schools and going into women's sports, than President Trump? And Trump being a real estate guy, he builds things in the physical world, unlike a lot of the pointy-headed intellectuals who may have sought high office, and the only things they build are imaginary worlds which are in their books. 9, decent. The U.S. should apologize and pay restitution for killing non-combatants, reverse Trump's Department of War rebrand, and stop funding allies that commit what Carlson called genocide, citing Israel. The world is kind of complicated. There aren't just always great guys. And as far as what's going on in the Middle East, do you notice that it seems like a bunch of the Middle Eastern nations are thrown in with Israel, not with Iran? So I don't claim to understand everything. I support questions about AIPAC. I think that AIPAC should register as a foreign lobbying organization. But it's my suspicion that behind the scenes, Trump knows the kind of shit that Israel is pulling, and I am certain that he calls them on it. 10, united. Carlson called for halting immigration until the effects of AI become clearer, ending benefits for undocumented immigrants, and making English the sole language of federal documents and ballots. Tucker, are you unaware that Trump closed the border? Tucker, are you unaware that Trump is deporting record numbers of undocumented workers? Are you aware that the self-deportation is continuing at record levels? Tucker, all these things that you're talking about, Trump is doing, or as I suspect, if he's not doing them publicly, he's doing them privately behind the scenes. So, as Scott Adams taught us, if we think the world if we think we understand the world, we should be able to predict what happens next. I believe that the American public is seeing that Trump is attacking many problems at the same time and that he's having a lot of successes. So when there is this united front, and I have to say, it seems strange to me that many of the friends of Trump from 2024 are not friends in 2026. I'm not sure if anybody is being paid behind the scenes, but all I can say is that the pattern suggests that they are. However, I believe that the American people are seeing through this. They understand when the left-wing media and the right-wing media is against a president who seems to be doing a hell of a job. Maybe that's because both the left and the right-wing media have been corrupted by powerful entities. Now, maybe I'm completely wrong with that. Maybe Trump has committed such heinous acts by releasing millions of Epstein documents, or he's committed a heinous act because he's going against Iran, a regime that every president since Carter has said is a danger to the world. Maybe that's wrong. I don't think so. I think that Trump is committed to cleaning up the shit that's gone wrong in the past 50 years, and he doesn't give a crap what people say about it, because in the end, the only thing that matters is not your pretty words, but what you got accomplished. So, those are my thoughts on a Friday afternoon. I hope you have a great weekend, America. Hopefully, this is not the best part of your day. Hopefully, the best part of your day is talking to the people in your world and doing good by them. Because remember, a person is only judged by the good they do to those around them. All right. Thanks and have a great weekend.